We reviewed what objects, methods, and properties are, and I introduced the idea of a class. We're now ready to write code to instantiate an object from the PDO class and use it to connect to our database. Open your htdocs directory in your text editor. We'll start where we left off last time. If you don't still have the code from the last project, you can download it from this video. In the root of the htdocs directory, let's create a temporary file we can use to look at the code we need to connect to the database. Let's call this file database.php. We don't need to create a clean web address for the page since we'll just be using it temporarily. In this file, we'll start by opening a PHP tag. To create an object from a class, you first specify a variable name for the object you want to create. We'll call our object DB for database. We want to assign this variable a value, so we use a single equal sign. To create a new object, we use the keyword new. We then specify the class name followed by an open parenthesis. Creating a new object from a class calls a function inside of that class, so you use parentheses after the class name like you do with functions. Creating a new object from a class calls a method inside of that class, so you use parentheses after the class name just like you do with functions and other methods. Just like with functions, when you create a new object from a class, you can often pass in arguments. With the PDO class, you pass in the information needed to connect to the database. This will include the host name, the database name, and user credentials. Be sure to look back at the earlier videos for your environment if you have trouble finding this information. The first argument you need when creating a PDO object is a string that identifies the database. Since it's a string, you start with quotation marks. For the string value, you first specify the type of database followed by a colon. What you put after the colon depends on the database engine. For MySQL, you type host and an equal sign followed by the name of the host to which you want to connect. After that, you type a semicolon followed by DB name and an equal sign followed by the name of the database. If your environment is using the default MySQL port of 3306, this string here might be all you need. MAMP uses a different port, so I have to specify the port number. I type another semicolon, followed by the word port and an equal sign, followed by the port number. That's the first argument to pass in when instantiating a new object from the PDO class. It's all surrounded by one set of quotation marks because it's one PHP string. Host here is not a PHP variable. It's just part of a piece of text that gets used to identify the database. For MySQL, the second argument is the username. For MySQL, the third argument is the password. Just for troubleshooting, let's display information about this DB variable to the screen. Let's take a look at this in the browser. If everything went correctly, you should see that the DB variable is an object of the PDO class. If you don't see that, then there must have been a problem connecting to the database. Make sure the database server is running and that your credentials are correct. We have now created an object from the PDO class, connecting it to our Shirts for Mike database. Before we start writing queries and retrieving data from it, we should talk about one more thing: handling exceptions.